Hello and welcome to another video. This one is going to be something more personal about the Kray twins, Ronnie and Reggie Kray. Of course, the sex lives of the twins was their own personal business, but after the violence, the next thing on the list people talk about with the Krays is their sexual orientation and long-standing rumours of potential sexual abuse. I will give you a warning that this video will contain sexual content, sexual words, but I will try and keep any sexual words to a minimum, or at the very least keep it a bit more classy. If you're easily triggered by any of this type of discussion due to past experiences, then you may want to skip this video. Obviously, things with the twins' sex lives, like most people, is closely guarded. It is a world nobody is really privy to unless you get outed for some kind of illegal sexual behaviour or deviancy. The Kray twins are not short of rumours and allegations involving their sexual behaviour, which is mainly Ronnie. Like I said before, after the violence, most people talk about the twins' sexual preferences or if they were involved in sexual abuse. I will try and cover it all in this video. Some of my thoughts will be repeated from other videos where we have discussed this subject before. I can only give my opinion from what I have read. I didn't know the twins personally. The twins' sex lives were really nobody's business unless of course it did overlap into the harm of others, but I do feel it needs to be talked about and that's why I'm making this video. Ronnie was an out gay man, as we know, and he never hid the fact he was gay. He does say himself that he was bisexual, but apart from a girl named Monica that he was friendly with in the 1960s, I see no other relationships that Ronnie had with women, as in intimate relationships with women, as in girlfriends. I'm sure we would have lots of evidence if this had happened. Nobody in the firm or people that was close to Ronnie ever mentioned Ronnie and girlfriends. It was always Ronnie and boyfriends. So with this, I am inclined to believe that Ronnie was gay and not bisexual. His subsequent marriages in Broadmoor were for publicity and financial gain. Gay marriage was not passed through Parliament until around 2013, and Ronnie had long since passed away by then. I don't think Ronnie would have married a man publicly, but I suppose you just never know. For Ronnie to be a gay man in the time Ronnie was a free man and in his chosen profession of being a gangster was very brave of him. I don't know of any other villains that came out as gay in that period of time. I don't even know if anyone has in this day and age, bar Manchester villain Dominic Noonan. While slightly infamous in the Manchester region, he's not as infamous on the scale as somebody like Ronnie Kray. Up until 1967, gay sex was a criminal offence, and then in 1967 it was rightly decriminalised. The consenting age set by the UK Parliament at the time was 21 and over. The 1960 legislation repealed the maximum penalty of life imprisonment for homosexual penetration. The punishment for a man over 21 having homosexual non-penetration sex with a man aged 16 to 21 was increased from 2 to 5 years imprisonment. Despite this, gay sex remained prosecutable unless it took place in strict privacy, which meant in a person's own home, behind locked doors and windows, with the curtains drawn and with no other person present in any part of the house. It continued to be a crime if more than two men had sex together, or if they were filmed or photographed having sex by another person. 7 men in Bolton were convicted of these offences and 2 were given suspended jail terms in 1998. Gay military personnel and merchant seamen could still be jailed until 1994 for behaviour that was no longer a crime between gay civilians. So to where we are now, there was big changes to the laws from 1967 onwards. I don't know how they would find out to prosecute people pre-1967, although gay men in the past have been notorious for conducting their business in outside lavatories, so I should imagine quite a few people were caught that way, a stray copper chancing upon them. In fact, a friend of the Krays and Labour politician Tom Dryburgh was caught in public lavatories with men a couple of times. Ronnie Kray probably had many partners during his years of freedom and inside the prison walls, but his most notable partner was a man called Robert Buckley, also known as Bobby. Ronnie met Bobby Buckley through a man named David Litvinoff. Buckley was Litvinoff's partner at the time. David Litvinoff owed money to Ron due to gambling debts on gambling tables at the Twins Club at the time called Esmeralda's Barn. The debt totalled more than £3,000. In lieu of payment, Litvinoff suggested that Ronnie take over the lease of a flat at Ashburn Place in Kensington. Bobby Buckley was also a croupier at Esmeralda's Barn, but I should imagine this would have been after he had met Ronnie Kray. Ronnie and Bobby had quite a long relationship that lasted up until Ronnie's arrest in May 1968. Bobby Buckley was also arrested during the investigations following the arrest of most of the members of the Kray firm in 1968. Bobby was brought in for questioning for some of the fraudulent activities the twins were involved in, but Bobby was later released. Reggie Kray's sexual orientation up until his arrest was seen as straight by his peers, and apart from a claim by Ronnie Kray's branding victim Lenny Hamilton, we have no other evidence to suggest Reggie Kray swayed any other way. The Lenny Hamilton claim was that he was at a house party one night with which the Krays and some of the firm were present. On his way to find a toilet, he went into one of the upstairs bedrooms by mistake and witnessed Reggie Kray giving a lad one, for want of a better term. Reggie quickly collared Lenny Hamilton and threatened that if he ever told anyone what he had seen that evening, then Lenny would be wiped off the face of the earth, or some term like that. I can't quite remember the exact words Reggie used that evening. We can take this though with a very large pinch of salt. Lenny Hamilton's recollections cannot be relied upon at all for any facts. Even with the story of his branding by Ronnie Kray in the early 1960s, he seemed to change his story at every telling of it. Some people don't believe the branding happened due to Lenny's unreliability and the lack of scars on his face, but I do believe it did happen, and a few of Lenny's peers attest to this, including Albert Donahue and Mickey Fawcett. I wouldn't be completely surprised if the Reggie story was true. I mean, after all, him and Ronnie were identical twins, basically the same person, and Reggie did bat for the other side during his prison years. If it was anyone other than Lenny Hamilton saying it, then we might sit up and take notice, but I think we can safely file it under rubbish, along with most of Lenny's other tales of the criminal world during the 1960s. Reggie, as we know, had a long relationship and short marriage with Frances Shay, and he also dated a couple of women we know about after that, Christine Boyce and Carol Thompson. On his arrest in May 1968, Reg was in the company of a young woman called June MacDonald. Ronnie was in bed with a young man called Martin Morgan, who I believe was the son of the twins' longtime friend and firm member, Dickie Morgan. Charlie Kray, the elder brother of the twins, was completely straight sexually. He was known as a ladies' man right up until his death, so we can firmly say that Charlie never batted for the other side. While we are on Charlie Kray, we will start some of the allegations of sexual abuse made against him and his brother Ronnie. The allegations are that of rape, and these allegations all come from two of the Till brothers, David and Bobby Till. The allegation made by the Tills about Charlie Kray is that Charlie raped David's wife Christine at some point in the 1960s. Christine would later commit suicide, and David, I think, attributed this to her being raped by Charlie. I don't know the timeline to this allegation. I don't know when it was supposed to have took place in the 1960s, and I don't know the date that Christine took her own life. We can't say that Charlie Kray never done this, but we can say by what we know of Charlie Kray that is said by others that knew him, that this would be totally out of character for Charlie. Charlie was known as a charming man by all that knew him. I don't think I've ever seen a bad word said about Charlie Kray. Charlie Kray liked his women, and he was a good looking man, so I'm sure he was not short of offers from the opposite sex. I struggled to come to terms with the fact that Charlie Kray would rape somebody, but saying that, you just never know, and you can't just dismiss the idea of it, no matter how unbelievable it seems. Sex offenders can sometimes be the most unlikely people hiding in plain sight. The allegations by David and Bobby Till against Ronnie Kray is that he raped them both on separate occasions. The rape of David Till was supposed to have happened in Ronnie's parents' house, in Ronnie's bedroom at 178 Valence Road, while David was inebriated. The twins' mother and father were alleged to have been in the house also at the time, asleep. After driving home from the Astor Club to Valence Road, Ronnie insisted that David Till was too drunk to drive himself back home due to swerving around on the drive from the Astor to Valence Road. Ronnie suggested that David stayed the night in Ron's room, to which David agreed, as long as there was, as David Till said, no funny business. "No, I promise I won't touch you," Ronnie insisted. But in the middle of the night, David woke up to find Ronnie crouched over him, forcing David Till down into the bed, telling David, "Just try it." David said he struggled for a while with Ron on the bed before Ronnie attempted to strangle him, eventually raping him. In the morning, Ronnie warned David Till not to say anything about what happened. David would have known only too well the fate that would await him if he did. David never told anyone about this alleged ordeal, not even his wife Christine. A similar set of circumstances happened with Bobby Till, alleging that he was raped by Ronnie Kray. I can't really pass judgment on if any of this is true or not. I myself do believe that the Till brothers do say some truths about the Krays and the firm, but I also think they tell some not so true things. Kray firm associate Mickey Fawcett says the Tills were pretty much rent boys hanging around the firm, where the Tills themselves say they were trusted friends of the Kray family. We can't just totally dismiss these accusations of rape by the Tills, but in the case of Charlie Kray, it does seem very hard to believe. A more likely scenario that fits in with Charlie Kray's personality would be that he had an affair with David Till's wife, Christine. We can understand not getting the police involved at the time. We are dealing with the Krays here. David Till would definitely have ended up with concrete boots. The accusations against Ron are harder to judge. Unlike the character of a placid Charlie Kray, Ronnie was more forceful and dominant in his personality. It is said he did not like no for an answer. He was a very violent, dangerous man who liked to get his own way. Of course, this is just one side to Ronnie Kray. On the other side, he was thoughtful, caring, and a generous man. All a complete contradiction, but that was Ronnie Kray, according to those that knew him. Like I said, I can't make a judgment on any of this. Really, that is up to you to decide after being presented with what allegedly happened. But I would say that the Ronnie Kray accusations seem more plausible than the ones aimed at Charlie Kray. Both Ronnie and David Till were drunk that evening after a heavy night out at the Astor Club in London's West End. Maybe David Till consented to something that night with Ron. Maybe he consented, then backed out, but Ron didn't want to take no for an answer. Then, of course, it is rape. This wasn't the first time David Till had sexual encounters with Ronnie Kray. He talks of another instance of Ronnie forcing him to have sex with a woman in a hotel room, with Ronnie looking on from an armchair, masturbating. I think this may have happened in Jersey or somewhere. David Till was tasked with taking money from London to where Ronnie was in a hotel on a business trip. Once again, drinks flowed, and it ended with some more sexual accusations against Ronnie Kray. Like most things with the Kray twins, we will never know the truth of what happened between Charlie, Ronnie and the Till brothers. These stories were told long after the Kray family passed on in books the Tills wrote about their time around the Kray firm. If these accusations are not true, it does make me wonder why they were said. The Tills were part of the Kray circle from the Double R Club days right up until the twins' arrest, so they would have had plenty of other stories to write about the twins, which they did. So it's puzzling why they would just randomly bring up that they were raped by Ron and Charlie raped David's wife Christine. The twins did cause David Till and his family turmoil after the George Cornell shooting in March 1966 by hiding away in David's flat in Moresby Road for a few weeks. So it could be getting the twins back for that, even though the twins were long dead when the book was published. Maybe it's just to tarnish the reputation that the twins have built up over the years, the hero worship that has built up. Or is it true? Did Ronnie Kray really do these things? It's easy to just dismiss these allegations, but any allegation of rape needs to be taken seriously and not just swept under the carpet. Ronnie, it seems, was quite known for pushing himself onto people and giving them unwanted attention. Journalist Michael Thornton was one of the people that spoke out in recent years about Ronnie Kray's unwanted attention one evening in a club. Michael Thornton was set upon a year later on the orders of Ronnie Kray due to snubbing these sexual advances by Ron that night. I have done a video on this on the channel. So we do have some evidence of Ronnie putting pressure on other men to get involved with him sexually. Of course, he was a gay man, and just like a straight man will chat up girls, Ronnie would do this with young men. It's only natural, but Ronnie, it seems, was more forceful on this occasion with Michael Thornton. One of the more enduring sexual things with Ronnie and Reggie Kray is the persistent rumours that they supplied young lads under age to the elite in what could be termed as a paedophile ring. As we know, the twins were heavily associated with two prominent government figures during the 1960s who were both gay or bisexual, one being Lord Robert Boothby, who was a member of the House of Lords, and the other being Tom Dryburgh, who at the time of his involvement with the twins was a serving Labour MP. Dryburgh's homosexuality had been an open secret in British political circles for many years, and he boasted of his rough trade conquests to colleagues. These conquests of young men would often take place in public lavatories. It is said that Winston Churchill once commented that Tom Dryburgh is the sort of person who gives sodomy a bad name. Robert Boothby, on the other hand, was more careful in his bisexual endeavours and vigorously denied that he was bisexual, although he did, however, once comment that subconscious bisexuality is a component part of all of us. It is reported that both men would visit dog racing tracks together where the criminal fraternity would hang out. As we know, both men were extremely seedy. Both of these men were heavily involved with the Krays in the early part of the 1960s. Tom Dryburgh got to know the Krays through a man called Teddy Smith, who was pretty much a member of the Kray firm. Incidentally, Teddy Smith also introduced the Till brothers to the Krays. Lord Robert Boothby got to know the twins through a man called Leslie Holt. Leslie Holt was a burglar and a rent boy and seemed to be the typical 1960s playboy type. He met the twins due to living in the same block of flats as the twins at Cedar Court. It is said that Leslie Holt met Boothby at a youth's boxing match. All these men eventually would visit the twins' club, Esmeralda's Barn in Knightsbridge. Homosexual parties were also alleged to have took place at Ronnie Kray's flat at Cedar Court, where all these men were alleged to have attended. Blue films would be shown, and sex encounters with young men were alleged to have taken place. The twins' cousin Ronnie Hart said that one night Ronnie Kray and Lord Boothby swapped boys. Robert Boothby especially had some rather odd tastes that I'm sure you have all read about. I won't go into too much detail, but it involved young lads and a glass table. As for supplying young lads underage to the elite, which would be Dryburgh and Boothby, I would tend to believe the young lads were 16 and up. This by today's standards would be okay, however, by the standards at the time, this definitely would not be okay. Now the consenting age for gay sex is 16. Back in 1967, when it was decriminalised, it was 21. But when these parties took place, it was the early 60s, so it was highly illegal. I feel it's highly likely that lots of young men at these parties could have been underage for that period of time. The question would be, how would you judge these men? By today's standards, where it is totally legal, or would you judge them by the standards of the time? Ronnie, when arrested on May the 8th, 1968, was found in bed with a 16-year-old called Martin Morgan. By the standards of the day, if Ronnie had sex with this young man, then it would be statutory rape, as at 16 he cannot consent to sex due to being under the age of consent. Ron was 34 at the time. Of course, I don't know what Ron did that night, if anything, so I am unable to judge. I suppose you can make your own minds up yourselves on what you think. As we know now, the MI5 were keeping tabs on Ronnie Kray and his powerful friends, and they called them hunters of young men. When you look at the bigger picture and the accusations against Ronnie Kray, it does make for grim reading. We have to remember that only 3 people have come forward saying about Ronnie Kray's aggressive sexual behaviour, 2 of the Till brothers and journalist Michael Thornton. There was an incident where Ronnie apparently aggressively made a boy go home with Robert Boothby after a night at a club. After all these years, and in today's climate where people do speak out about this type of thing, there has been no other accusations against Ronnie Kray or Boothby and Dryburgh for that matter, and all 3 are now long dead. None of the Kray firm also never really speak about the ages of these young lads that hung around Ronnie. There seems to be no concern around this. Albert Donahue mentions Ronnie and young boys in his interviews, but he never elaborates any concern over the ages. It is all quite a muddled picture, and the only real evidence of Ronnie Kray and underage lads is when he was arrested with a 16-year-old in his bed. 16 years old is okay by today's standards. Well, it's legal. Even though it is legal today, a 34-year-old with a 16-year-old, in my opinion, is not morally right. But that's just my opinion. But 16 years old in 1968 was highly illegal, and if any sexual acts took place, then it is 100% classed as rape, as the 16-year-old cannot consent when the age of consent is 21 and over. Reggie never seems to be mentioned in any of these things. I can't think of any accusations against Reg. Reg was often in Ronnie's flat when they both lived at Cedar Court, but there seems to be no evidence from anyone that Reggie attended the alleged sex parties that were held there. I keep saying alleged sex parties, but I think we can say with some degree of certainty that these sex parties did happen in Ronnie Kray's flat and were attended by Robert Boothby and Tom Dryberg, amongst others. In his later years in prison, Reggie was warned about hanging around with young offenders, but we don't know if this was because of anything sexually or if it was just he was seen as a bad influence on them. The Brad Lane stuff could be possibly dodgy, but I don't really know enough about that to comment on it. Brad Lane was Reggie's so-called adopted son, but I don't think he adopted him properly. What's curious about the Brad Lane thing though is that his mother Kim Lane was actually going on trial for sex offences against minors. I think it might have been historical sexual offences, but she took her own life before she could face any type of justice. Another sex offender linked to Reggie Kray was the utter cretin Pete Gillette. He was very close to Reg during the late 80s and the 90s, and he is now in prison serving 18 years. He was convicted of numerous historical sexual offences, including a couple of counts of rape, and he even abused his own son. Pete Gillette is a complete waste of oxygen, and hopefully he will die in prison. The twins do seem to be tied to a lot of sex scandal. Of course, it's not Reggie's fault that Pete Gillette turned out to be a paedophile, but it is strange how the twins are linked to all this stuff. It's not until I have done this video that I have actually looked at it all laid out, and it seems to be a reoccurring theme. Of course, most of it could be complete nonsense, but we will never really have the evidence to have anything conclusive on it all. For the rapes, we have to either take David and Bobby Till's word for it, or just disregard it. Not that believing if it's true or not will do anything, as it's all in the past now, and Ronnie and Charlie Kray have both passed on. The Krays are quite revered by a lot of people, even hero worshipped in some cases, and these types of things does muddy the waters. Sadly, we will never know the full truth of all this now. Although there is still a lot of files to be released about the Krays and their activities, I do feel we will never get to the bottom of this subject. Maybe the Tills are right about being raped by Ronnie Kray, and that tells us all we need to know. Unfortunately, it's impossible for the Till brothers to offer us any other evidence except their word, but we have a few other things to go along with it that can add up to a bigger picture, like Ronnie Kray's forceful personality as demonstrated by his aggressive sexual advances on journalist Michael Thornton. Of course, this alone does not make you guilty of rape. I'm not sure where I have gone with this video. It's not that in depth because there isn't too much to say on it due to lack of any real evidence. I cannot offer you too much of a conclusion on what I think, not because I don't want to or feel I shouldn't. It's just lots of evidence to come to the full conclusion just isn't there. There is no evidence of this paedophile ring that is alleged to have existed. I'm not saying it's out of the question, it's just I've not seen any real evidence of it involving the Kray twins. Tom Dryberg and Robert Boothby still have skeletons in their closet years after their deaths, I'm sure, but nobody has come forward with any evidence of sexual abuse yet. It's not a nice subject to talk about, but the accusations are out there about Ronnie Kray, and they have been for a long time. Like I said at the start of the video, after the talk of the violence of the Krays, this subject is usually the second one mentioned. It will be nice to see your thoughts on this subject in the comments. Does any of this change your perspective on the Krays, or is it a case of you would need to see more evidence to have an opinion on it? So that's about it for this video. It's a bit grim, but I still hope you have enjoyed it. I don't know when the next video will be. It will be just as and when. So thank you for watching, and I will see you again in the next video. Thank you.